What's up? We're live. Hey, my name's Cameron. I'm a product marketing manager at Tinybird. I've got April with me, developer advocate. Today is going to be fun. We're going to build a real-time personalization pipeline using Tinybird. And the reason this is really fun is I'm a product marketing manager at Tinybird. I'm also Tinybird's resident beak geek. I love birds. I'm an avid bird watcher, bird photographer. And I also own a bird-themed e-commerce store. And so today, what I'm going to do is actually build a personalization feature for my real store, my real life store. So I'm really excited to sort of bring all of my sort of passions and skills into one space.
Yeah, all that's left to do is for you to make a little jingle and play it on your guitar, and then we're good. Have it all tied together.
Man, it's been a while. Let's kind of jump in. I'm gonna just give y'all some background. So this is my store. It's called Color Flock. And what we're going to work on today is a personalization in the checkout. So right now, if you click on a shirt and you add it to your cart, what you see is this, you may also like little recommendation here. Let me see if I can zoom in a bit. So it's basically saying, hey, you added the shirt to your cart. You might also like these 3 products. This you might also like is based on, and actually if we go and look at the dev tools, let me start this over again and open the cart. I got a filter on. So this is actually based on Shopify's recommendations Ajax API. So you can see that request being made here. You can pass this product ID and then it will say, hey, these are the 3 products that Shopify recommends based on, some intent data. I don't actually fully understand the algorithm. But the reason that I don't like this is because this is not personalized. So this is a recommendation. It's not a personalized offer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to change this to be a personalized offer. And actually, April, I'm going to ask you to turn off the music because I'm getting this.
Now you're jamming too much.
Yeah, I'm jamming a little too much. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to work on this part of the store, and we're going to use Tinybird to do that. So let's I'm going to talk through kind of what this is going to look like. And actually I'm going to do a little diagramming here because I feel like that's more fun than slides. So I've got my iPad and I'm going to just draw. So what I want to do is, so when the way that my store works is if you buy, say, 2 t-shirts or 2 mugs or 2 posters or whatever, I actually get an incremental cost savings to ship the second whatever. And so I kind of pass that on and I say, well, if you buy 2 t-shirts, you get 20% off of the second one. And so what I want to do is say, hey, if you add 1 t-shirt, oh, that's a bad t-shirt with this bird, with this bird, I want to get you to add another t-shirt with, another bird that's got, whatever. I'm actually much better at drawing birds in real life. And I'm going to give you this one.
All the birds on the shirt are actually on the real shirts are drawn by Cameron. So this is definitely a quick sketch.
Yes, quick sketch. So I'm giving you 20% off, if you add that. So my goal here is to say, if a customer, adds this to their cart, I want to give you this offer. I want to offer you 3 shirts that will get you that 20% off bonus that I think that you're going to like. And that's going to be based on intent, right? So I want to look at, based on the shopper's intent, what are we, what should we show? And one of the things that, we'll kind of do here, let's rotate this. One of the things that we'll look at is we're going to look at session data. So we're going to look at data that was created in the current session. So products that the shopper has looked at in the current session, that is something that's an intent signal. So if somebody adds this red-tailed hawk t-shirt to the cart and they've also looked at a Magnolia Warburg t-shirt, or they've maybe added that to their cart and then removed it. We want to prioritize that because I believe that session data is the highest intent. Somebody's looked at a product very recently. We want to put that back in front of them. And then we're also going to look at the client data. So historically, what products has this client shown interest in? And let's bring those up as well. And then finally, we're going to actually look at the store data, which is, what are the top selling products in the store? And if the shopper hasn't shown any intent, what should we show them based on what we think is most likely to sell? So we're going to take all of this and kind of combine it into a single API. And we're going to replace the Shopify recommendations API with this API that we built in Tinybird. So I'm going to stop sharing my really bad drawing. And let's look at I'm just going to really quickly, we don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but I'm going to really quickly show you the code for this. There are two elements here. This is my Shopify store. There are two things that I'm going to show that are relevant. The first is just this cart drawer liquid file. Liquid is, that's Shopify's sort of templated HTML. And in particular, we have this little section right here, which is, what this is those three recommended items that I'm showing you. You can see we have this little wrapper div. We just do a little liquid for loop and we say generate three of these, call them recommended item, 1, 2, 3. And then right now they have this placeholder image and kind of a placeholder title.
Yeah.
That's
and
the HTML.
If you want to follow along also, you can head over to tbird.co/gist and see all the code that Cameron is going through right over there.
Yeah, that's a GitHub gist. It kind of has all the stuff we'll walk through, so you can follow along. And then this recommended item. So this is a JavaScript that runs right now. It gets loaded. When the content gets loaded, it identifies the cart drawer, and then essentially what it does. This is not particularly important, but a mutation observer and a call intercept to basically trigger this recommendations fetch. And then this is the function that's actually recommending. So first we check to make sure that cart recommended items wrapper exists. So we're saying, hey, there's one item in the cart, let's show another. And then we get the product ID. So that cart item actually has a data attribute that we pull down. We say, get the product that's in the cart. And then we fetch the Shopify recommendations API and sort of replace those the content in those divs with what Shopify recommends. So really where we're going to be focused on is kind of this right here, is saying, okay, let's replace this Shopify API with a custom personalized API based on what we built in Tinybird and based on kind of the shopper intent data. Of course, this all starts with actually collecting the data. And so let's actually go look at Shopify. So this is a Shopify pixel that I have created for my store. And what this does is it actually sends data to Tinybird. So I'll just walk through this really quickly. Again, the code is in the gist if you want to sort of replicate this. But the two important things I want to call out is I create two cookies. I create a session ID and a client ID. So naturally the session ID expires. That's a 30-minute cookie, expires in 30 minutes. It's called TV session ID. And then I create a client ID, which kind of has a max age. And that client ID is anonymous. I don't do any IP tracking or anything like that. It's just a unique identifier that says, hey, this is this visitor that has visited before. You can obviously opt out of this cookie if you don't want to be tracked on the site. And then what this cookie does is it will create a payload for different action types. So there's a common payload, user agent, refer, path name, href of the event. And then for these sort of different actions, so product viewed, added to cart, removed, checkout, all those, they sort of have different things that we add to this payload. So for instance, when somebody checks out, we add the line items and the total price into that payload. And then we kind of package that into a JSON object and send it to the Tinybird events API. So in this case, this is my endpoint. My data source name is Shopify events. I put all of this into this JSON object. So I have a timestamp, session ID, client ID, the action taken, and then this payload, which is kind of like just an unstructured JSON object that's stringified. So it'll be a string column in my data source that I can sort of process later. And then down here is just kind of analytics.subscribe. This is something that Shopify exposes. So you can send these events when Shopify detects that these things have happened. So that's the pixel. And what that looks like in Tinybird is I have this Shopify events data source. What, did I just lose internet? Okay, great. So I have this Shopify events data source, and you can see those columns in here: timestamp, session ID, action, version, payload, and then client ID. And you'll notice client ID and session ID are nullable. Those were columns I didn't initially have when I first started doing this, and then I added them later on, so they're nullable. So I have some null values kind of historically. You can see, I have 33,000 rows in here, so it's not a huge table by any means. My store is very modest. I don't do a ton of sales, but that's kind of the data that we're working with. The other thing you'll notice is that this is kind of the schema of this table. This is under the hood is kind of a ClickHouse table. Timestamp is the primary sorting key. So if I filter by timestamp, that's going to be how I sort of optimize my queries. And we'll get into some of that in a little bit on just some of the optimization techniques for this pipeline. But the net of it is, I have this pixel on the store, and it's sending data to Tinybird. And actually, I have this kind of events timeline. And if I go, over here to my store and kind of take some actions, look at some products, things like that, then I'm actually seeing those show up on this timeline. So these events have just been written to that data source. This is a time series that's refreshing every 5 seconds. So you can actually see those events, have shown up here. So that data is instrumented using that pixel, and it's showing up in Tinybird. So I kind of have this baseline of data that I can work with in that table. So again, what I want to do is then kind of take that data and build an API. And so the way that you do that in Tinybird is with pipes. So pipes are effectively SQL kind of, what's the word? Like notebooks, right? So you can write sort of chained nodes of SQL. And I should add, as an aside, having all of this data in Tinybird as a store owner has been really valuable to me because it gives me a lot of flexibility in sort of assessing store performance, looking at things like I have this API to actually check what are the things that people have searched for. I can actually see intent behind what people have searched for. I actually have an API. I've created a little chart out of this. Where is my chart? Go to charts. Yeah, so I have this little chart, that I can see, hey, people love the woodcock shirt. I don't know what it is, but woodcocks are really weird looking birds, and people love them. I'll show you what this weird little bird looks like. Yeah, it's just the derpiest bird you've ever seen. And people love this shirt. You can see, so I don't have a common loon on my store, but people have expressed interest in it. So this is kind of this nice, almost like a data warehouse for me to just be able to explore the data, see the intent, see what people are trying to do. Another thing that's really nice about pipes is that they're reusable. So I actually have this pipe that I've called Shopify Events, Not Bots, that does some work to filter out traffic that I know comes from bots, whether that's Google's bot or traffic that I might be creating in my own dev environment or something like that. I can filter that out so it doesn't show up in my analytics. And then I can reuse this Shopify Events, Not Bots endpoint almost like a table, right? So like if I look at these top sources, you can see that I'm selecting from that pipe. So it's basically, I'm just reusing that code. I can open this up and see kind of the schema matches the events. I've just filtered out the bots, but it's nice that I don't have to sort of create a separate table. I can just reuse that SQL in my subsequent pipes. So let's start building an API because there's a lot to do here. I should also add, like, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. April can help answer them. I can help answer them. Other folks that might be in the chat can help answer them. Yeah. But let's build an API.
And if you want to play along at home, go try Tinybird out. Get started in just a couple minutes. I think, having all the data there, being able to play around, do some analysis, see things you want. I mean, definitely a benefit to Tinybird, and it's pretty fun. Let's be honest. I have a lot of fun. It's pretty fun.
It is pretty fun. Okay, so I am creating this pipe that is called Shopify event, or it's called cart recommended products. So we're taking, our Shopify events, not bots, and we're going to build a recommendation API using SQL. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with some session data. And so what I want to look at is I want to get, I'm going to extract from the payload. If I actually look at this payload column, open this up a bit, we'll see that, I have this path name, and so I'm going to extract that path name from that JSON object. So we'll just call that JSON extract string from the payload, and we're going to pull out the value for the path name key. We'll call this path name. So you can just see that, okay, now we have this path name. And actually what I want to do is I only want to get actions for the product. So I'm just going to add a little filter in here where path name, like, we'll just use a wildcard here, products. So that will only get actions for, that have been taken on actual products. And actually I'm going to add a trailing backslash there. So we only get and a leading backslash. There we go. Okay.
If you wanted to too, you can, instead of saying path name like and kind of hard coding it there, you can also make that a dynamic variable, because maybe in the future you'll decide, oh, I want to account for some of these collections or some of these other areas as well. So definitely something.
Stealing my thunder, nice. April.
Oh, were you about to go there?
Oh, we're gonna get there. Yeah.
Oh.
No,
forget I said that.
So what I want is to get just like this last little handle bit. I don't need the product, so I'm just going to kind of split that out as handle, and I'm just going to fix this. Payload path name. Okay, so now I have these handles, and what I also want to do is I want to filter by, so this is going to be my session data. I'm just going to name this node session data. A node in a pipe is just like one little SQL subquery that we're building within this bigger pipe. So I actually want to filter by where session ID is equal to a particular session ID. And in my API, I want to pass this as a parameter. So I'm going to create a parameter for session ID.
That's so crazy you can do that. Wow. Dynamic parameters, who knew?
And for the sake of kind of being able to see some data, I'm going to actually go and grab my value for like my current cookie. So I can actually pull that out of here and grab the current session ID. That'll be my default. And so now you'll see these are the products that I've interacted with, which if you were watching, you said, oh yeah, he did woodcock, red-tailed, t-shirt, barn owl, all that. So that's giving me kind of for the session, the products that I've interacted with. And now what I want to do to sort of figure out intent is I want to create a score. So I'm going to like score these interactions. And there's some really complex stuff you could do here. there's like, really great use cases for like vector embeddings and doing some more like AI ML using Tinybird as a feature store. There's a lot of really deep stuff you can do here. I'm going to keep my algorithm very simple, kind of just for the sake of time. So I'm just going to do a little like count if action equals, so if somebody views the product, that's worth 1 point, plus we'll count if action equals added to goodness gracious cart, and I'll make that worth 10, right? And we'll call that score. And then we're just going to need to group by handle and order by score. So now we can see, these things are getting scored, which makes sense. I viewed the red-tailed hawk t-shirt and I added it to my cart, so that's its score. So I've shown the most intent during this session for that red-tailed hawk t-shirt. So that's kind of the basics of what I want here. I am going to also, one of the things that I also want to do in this API is, if you remember, when we add something to the cart, we want to show, a similar product. Like we want to show a t-shirt, but we don't want to show the same t-shirt. I want to show 3 different t-shirts that I think people will like. So I'm going to add some additional filters here to say, we'll say, what is this? Actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to add a multi-if, and this is a shout out for data governance. The way that I structured my URLs does not lend itself well to like pulling out the product type. If I could restructure them, I'd have a subfolder for each. Like I'd have t-shirts, I'd have mugs, I'd have, but I don't have that. So I actually have to pull it out. I have to strip it from this handle. And kind of the simplest way for me to do that is, say if handle like t-shirt, we're going to call this product t-shirt. And I'm just going to copy and paste this here. I have 4 different types of products on my store. I also have mugs. So we're going to do mug, sweatshirts, sweatshirt, and poster. And then I'm going to call this as product type. So if we throw that in there, what did I do wrong? Oh, I need a default. None. Okay, so now we're getting the product type for those things I've looked at. If I go and look at, let's go look at a mug, just to kind of, this is my favorite. I love this barred owl mug. So we'll get that in there. And if I run this again, give it a little second to populate. Okay, there it is. So now I'm seeing my barred owl mug, and it has a score of 1 because I just viewed that. And then what I also want to do, so I want to add a filter to say, and product type is equal to, and I'm going to create another parameter here called current product type. So we're going to pull that product type from the cart, and I'll just set a default of t-shirt so we can show some data here. And then finally, I don't want to show the same product, so another filter to say, and handle is not equal to string current product handle, and we'll just throw in red-tailed hawk t-shirt for that. Okay, so it's not gonna, now it's gonna leave off the red-tailed hawk shirt from, so now I'm only returning shirts from the session that aren't the shirt that I currently have in the cart. So this is kind of what this is what I want here. This is the pipe I want here. One of the things you'll notice, this node is scanning the entire table, 33,000 rows. And that's because that table is sorted by timestamp. So actually, I'm going to add another filter and just say, and timestamp is greater than or equal to, kind of do the last 30 minutes, because that's how long a session ID will last. And so that's going to massively reduce the amount of data that I scan. because that's how that data is sorted. So I'm just adding that in there to minimize my scan size when I run this query. Okay, so this is kind of our session data. What I want to do then is also get client data, kind of historical client data, and then historical store data. So I'm going to just copy this node and create a new one. And I'm going to call, I'm going to run this. I'm going to call this client data. And then I'm just going to do one thing here. Okay, actually a couple things. We're going to filter by client ID instead of session ID. And I'm going to go and grab my client ID as a default, just so we can see that data here. So I'm grabbing the value from that cookie. And then same deal. And then the only thing I'm going to change here is that because client data, there's a historical component here. I don't want to look at just the current session. I want to look back like 60 days and say, hey, what has this client looked at in the last 60 days? And you'll actually see, I have a lot of history, looking at my own store. And these are the things that I have, I've calculated the score. So I've apparently shown a lot of intent on this Blackburnian warbler t-shirt in the past.
Is that your favorite bird, Cameron?
No, I was just testing it, and I think I added it to the cart about 30 times. I was testing this, and so that's why that is so high. So this is kind of giving me like client historical data. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this, and then I'm just going to get store data. So we're going to drop this filter here, and then I'm just going to look back 30 days. So this is the top products on the store for the last 30 days based on interactions from all customers. So who has, the shirts that have been looked at most and added to cart most, the scores get calculated here. And this is across all of my clients. So now I have these 3 nodes. I'm going to call this store data. And what I actually want to do, like my algorithm, is that I want to prioritize session data first, then client data, then store data. So I'm just going to this is how I'm handling that. I'm going to just add a priority column. I'll say this is 2 as priority. Nope. And then 3 as priority. Okay, and then I am just, and actually the other thing that I'm going to do is I'm only going to ever return 3. So I'm going to limit these results to I'm only going to show 3 recommendations in the cart drawer. So to make my union, my coming union more efficient, we're just going to select select star from session data union all select. We're just going to union these into one little table. Select star from store data. Okay. Data. There we go. Okay. So now I'm just combining those. I'm going to call these combined results. So I have that. And then all I want to do is now I want to fill out based on this intent that I have. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to get handle. I'm going to get the minimum priority. So a shirt could show up in the session data, the client data, or the store data, but I want to get, hey, if it showed up in the session data, I want to prioritize that because that's got the highest priority, is the lowest value. And then I want to get the max score as score from this combined results and order by priority, ascending, score, descending, and then again, limit to 3 results. And so now it's not under, yep. Group by handle. I always forget the group by. So now I have the 3 products that I am going to recommend. So what we can see here is the results that are being showed. I have, this American Woodcock shirt and the Barn Owl shirt are items that I've looked at during this session. They have scores, so they're prioritized, and then the highest scoring item from the client history is also added here. And so I am going to call this node endpoint, and this is going to be the node that I publish as an API endpoint. And that's what that looks like in Tinybird. You take that SQL query and you publish it as an HTTP endpoint. And actually, we can just pull this from here. When you create an endpoint in Tinybird, a static read-only token gets created. If I have time, I'm actually going to show how we can use a JWT to secure this endpoint and kind of implement some row-level security in that. Like if I just drop this endpoint in the browser, you can see the JSON response that I get. So I'm getting 3 rows of data with this stuff. So I'm going to very quickly implement this, and I'm this is not a JavaScript demo, so forgive me for kind of maybe glossing over a little bit. But first thing I'm going to do is let's open up VS Code here and just let's create a branch. Git checkout. Call this cart personalization, and then we're going to let's just do something like okay. Here's the first thing I'm going to do is just drop in some helper functions. These are not particularly important, but I want to drop them in because these are what the JavaScript is going to use to fetch the cookies that I have, the session ID and client ID. Close this. So you can just see this is a function to get the cookie. We're going to get session ID and client ID. And then I'm also just going to, right now, I'm going to, just going to set the pipe name as a constant so I can access that later on. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here, and remember, this is kind of where we're focused. So what I'm going to start with is, first of all, one of the things that we need to fix really quick, and I'm not going to belabor this, but the Shopify API uses a product ID, but my API needs a product handle and the product type. So I'm actually going to get these attributes from the cart drawer, and I actually might need to change this. Let's go look at cart drawer item 1. There's a data attribute in the item here. Where is it? Sorry, scrolling through Shopify Liquid is not very exciting here.
No, Command F, yeah.
Where is it? What is it called? Cart. Oh, there you go. Okay, there we go. So I have this data product ID. So I'm actually going to change this to data product handle and data product type. So instead of product item ID, I'm going to get product item. Pretty sure it's product handle. These are just Shopify attributes that I'm getting here, and then item.type. This might actually just be handle. I might have that wrong. Let me go look at my reference code. I don't want to waste time on this.
Yeah,
that's not why we're here.
I will say that is one of the nice things about working with Tinybird and Tinybird's ability to publish APIs is, working with APIs is a little bit more maybe universal than having to learn a bunch of different kind of frameworks or languages and everything. So, yeah.
Yes. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and let's just call this initial commit on this branch, and then we're going to get, we're going to create this remote branch. Okay, now I'm going to go to my Shopify store, and I'm going to create a new theme. Shopify's GitHub integration is super cool. I can go and grab color flock and then get this cart personalization branch. So I'm going to create a new kind of dev theme based on this branch that I'm building. And while that is getting set up, let's just go. I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to just paste in the JavaScript that I know works and kind of explain what the changes that I made, because I think that's kind of the important stuff here. And actually, what you're going to see in this is that I'm going to explain a couple of things because a lot just happened in this. All right, let's look at this code. So we have those helper functions, get the cookie, also have a JWT being generated. I am going to deal with that later. So right here, I'm creating a JWT. I'm going to talk about that later because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say let token equals, and I'm just going to use the read token that I have for this pipe, the static token. If we have time, we'll come back to generating a JWT. Why would I create a JWT? I mean, the nice thing is that if I don't want to expose the like the client ID and the session ID in the API request from the browser, the JWT can hide that in some kind of these fixed parameters. In my use case, it's not that big of a deal. Like the worst thing that could happen is somebody sees recommendations for another shopper, assuming they can guess their client ID. That's not a big security risk, but there is some nice things that you could do there. But I just want to, and I'm just going to comment out this JWT generation code so that we, / how about, so that we don't worry about that. And then we've got the token. So here's what's happening, right? We have this base URL, which is my pipe. We're creating these search params from the product type and the product handle. I also need to add the, I'm going to pull this down from the JWT. That's what I'm passing. Sorry if this is difficult to follow along. I would normally pass the session ID and the client ID as fixed parameters in the JWT. I'm just going to do it sort of manually here. So we're going to say session ID equals session ID and not equals, this is JSON object. Okay, then client. Good.
Fluent.
Client ID. Yeah. Clients. My goodness.
It's hard. It's hard to type live.
And I'm, the way I'm naming my variables. Come on, Cam. Okay. All right. So that's going to pass those as parameters. We're going to get this URL. It's going to fetch that from Tinybird using that API and then sort of parse that response. And then it's actually going to use Shopify's products API to go and fetch the information for that product. So it'll get the URL, the featured image, the title, and stuff. So this is taking Tinybird's recommendations, fetching the product information from Shopify, and then rendering it in the store. So let's save that and push it. Tinybird API, get push origin. All right, now, assuming I got my data attributes correct, we can go and preview this version of the store, this branch. So you can see we're previewing the branch that we just created, and there you go. So this is now serving these shirts from my Tinybird API. Let's just show this kind of in real time. I'm going to open up the dev console so we can see the network requests happening here. But I'll go down and I'm going to pick the shirt, the tufted titmouse shirt, and I'm going to add this to my cart, and we'll see the cart drawer open. And then those recommendations just got fetched. And if we filter by Tinybird, we'll see this was the fetch to that Tinybird endpoint. And so we passed okay, so these were obviously undefined. We need to work on that. We need to work on that part of the code. But then we got this response, which is what we expect from the Tinybird API. The reason it's not working, I'm getting the same product because I have obviously not handled my product type and my product handle attributes correctly there. Let me see if I can fix that real quick. April, vamp for me.
Vamp. Yeah, I mean, the good part here is, all these struggles aren't coming from the Tinybird side, so that's nice. But I am curious.
Always the web dev.
I am curious. Anyone at home what's your favorite bird? I was asking Cameron about this before. Also, Cameron really likes birds. Obviously, works at Tinybird, has this Tinybird or has this bird themed e-commerce store. So, I mean, they're cool. It's I live in Pittsburgh, which is where the National Aviary is. I still have not been, but I should go. For me, um, if you look up barnacle goose, I think that is quite the bird, and the way that its parents just kind of push the children to fly when maybe they're not quite ready yet is pretty amazing. So if you want to watch a quick video, it's like a BBC thing about barnacle geese. But yeah, I've been having a lot of fun here. It's been here about 6-7 weeks, I guess, and having so much fun on the Tinybird side. If you want to, try it out, definitely head over and give it a go. Bring your own data, whatever data you want to play with. If you're looking for data to play with, I really like using Kaggle, Kaggle. They have some huge data sets that are used kind of for data analysis, but just to kind of get comfortable with the Tinybird UI and everything. It's a great place to find a big data set if you don't have one already. Let's think. What else? I mean, are you almost there?
Thank you for vamping. I am. I'm trying to figure out. I've obviously messed up this. Just the way that I'm handling these data attributes in the cart drawer. So I'm looking at my old code to make sure that I can fix it. It's not super important, but I would like to.
I mean, naming conventions, right? They get you. They get you all the time. I'm curious, anyone in the comments, if you have preferred naming conventions, are you an underscore person? Do you like all caps? How do you like to name your different things? Are you tables should be named plural versus singular? I mean, there's a lot of ways to do it, but definitely as you're working on bigger projects and you have a lot of different names for things, working with different systems where maybe they have different kind of paradigms or standard naming procedures, it gets pretty hard out there. I wonder if anyone out there has any advice or things you like to do when it comes to naming. It looks like we're ready to roll.
It's fixed. Okay. I just figured out
back to you, Cameron.
How I was getting those. So now what I'm doing is if we look at this initial element in the cart, we can see that it has these data product type attributes and data product handle attributes that we're using to pass to our Tinybird API. So again, if I kind of clear this, we can see that request. These are the kind of the query parameters that are being made to that request, and then the response that we're getting is these 3 shirts. And if you remember, this is exactly what we should expect. For me, like I've looked at the way this is scored, and actually if I delete this and let's just go, we'll just, for the sake of fun here, I'm going to add the tufted titmouse shirt to my cart a few times to really boost its score. Now, if I go and I look at the hummingbird's a great one, right? So, and then let's.
I love that color.
It's a good one. Let's add this to my cart, and then boom, there's the titmouse shirt is now showing up based on that score. So that's cool. That's real time. Like that session intent is being factored into the shirts that are being shown. And I would actually probably also change this header and say, hey, get 20% off if you add another one of these. It's kind of putting that offer in front of them. Okay, so we've called this API a few times. We can actually go back into Tinybird and look at the API and kind of get a sense for the performance. And I'm not particularly happy with this performance. Especially the amount of processed data. This API is processing way too much data. And I think part of the reason it's doing that is it's having to scan way too much data at query time, sort of applying all these filters and pulling all that data together. And so I'm going to optimize this pipeline in the time that we have left. I'm not going to get to JWTs, which I don't think is super important. We've demoed that before. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some materialized views to sort of optimize this pipeline. And if you're not familiar with materialized views in Tinybird, what they do is essentially pre-compute aggregates at ingestion time. Unlike materialized views that you may have encountered in other databases, in Tinybird, which is backed by ClickHouse under the hood, materialized views are calculated incrementally. Like as new data is ingested, those aggregates are recalculated. So the benefit here is that you're doing all of that processing, you're using all of that compute one time on ingestion rather than many times on query. So we're going to save a lot of resources on the query side by sort of doing that pre-calculation on the ingest side. And so what I'm going to do is start by, I'm just going to copy this session node and I'm going to create a new pipe. And I'm going to call this, session data. Can I call it that? Yeah, there's a node with that. We'll call it session data 0, or session data pipe. And paste in that code. And then what I want to do is, so instead of having these filters in here, we're going to drop all these filters. We're going to drop this timestamp filter. We are going to kind of pre-calculate these aggregates ahead of time. And so what I'm going to do is, so like for session score, I want to do, and I'll explain some of this, what I'm doing here in a second. So I'm going to aggregate by hour. I'm going to call this as hour. And then, did I spell that right? To start of hour. There we go. And then we're going to get I'll just coalesce because I have some nulls, the session ID as session ID. And then we're going to get that handle, get the product type, do the score, do all that stuff that we've been doing. Have those same filters. We could also just add, and session ID. ID is not null, so we can just pull those out if we wanted to. And then we're going to group by hour, session ID, handle, and product type. So we're basically pre-calculating these scores as new data is ingested. And I'm going to drop this limit. So we're pre-calculating these scores for every hour, for every session, for every handle. And so what we're going to do is we're going to store that into this new data source.
Is this, Cameron, is this also worth having a timestamp filter on or no, right? Okay.
Yeah, and the reason is, so if I actually figured this out yesterday, Jordy at Tinybird helped me. So if I added, and timestamp is greater than or equal to now, minus interval 30 minutes, whatever. That is always going to be true when this data is calculated. So if the event is created and it's processed through this materializing pipe, the data is very fresh. This filter is always going to be true. So what we're gonna take this filter and we're gonna put it in the endpoint. Mm-hmm. And then what we're also gonna do, so query has changed. So we're gonna run it and we're gonna create a materialized view out of this. Where am I templating? Oh, there we go. That little percent thing there is an indicator to Tinybird that we're using templating, but we're not. So we're going to create an MV called session data MV, and the sorting key, the primary sorting key I want to be session ID, because then we're going to filter by session ID. That's going to be our primary filter. And I'm also going to set a time to live on this. So I only need to look at session data that's a day old. I'll do 2 days just to make sure that I have, I don't know if there's like a 24-hour kind of overlap situation, but that will mean that the resulting data source is only going to retain data from the last 2 days. And that's great for kind of storage costs, because when you create a materialized view, yes, you're kind of shifting the processing burden and and minimizing that, but you do have some added storage. In this case, it's very negligible, but that is something to consider. So we're setting that TTL, and then we'll go ahead and populate. We can do all data up to 2 million rows, new data only. I'm just going to do up to 2 million rows because I don't even have that many. And so then what is happening is that these aggregates are being calculated into a new data source. And actually, I need to do one thing. We're going to go back here real quick because we don't want to store the aggregates themselves. We want to store aggregate states. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on how states and merges work for materialized views. Tinybird, we have some really good documentation on this, but what we want to do is actually want to store the intermediate aggregate states, and then we're going to merge them in the final materialized view. So let's just go ahead and delete that one we just created. Go back to our session data pipe, create a materialized. We keep those states there. Okay. And so now what you'll see is I'm storing, instead of the actual calculated score, I'm storing this sort of aggregated state. We're going to create a materialized view with the session ID up top, call it session data MV, set that TTL to 2 days, and then do the populate. And Tinybird is handling all of this for me under the hood. So now when new data comes in, these scores are all going to be pre-calculated for the session IDs, which is great. And so now what I can actually do is go into my cart recommended products, and instead of selecting from Shopify events, not bots, I can select from session data MV. And I'm going to open this up because I've got, I need to update some of my, so I've already calculated the handle. So I don't need to do this processing. I don't need to do this processing. And I don't need to do this processing. But what I am going to do is I'm going to merge the aggregates in this materialized view. And all I'm going to do here then, I still retain these filters, and this is where I'm applying that is greater than 1 day. And I'm just gonna, well, actually, I guess I can look back. We'll just do 60 minutes. We'll look back. Well, I'll just do 1 day, it's fine. It really doesn't matter because that session data is gonna be handled. Yeah, I don't have a payload, you're right. I don't need this anymore. That's being calculated in the materialized view. Product type, group by handle, product type, and priority. There we go. And so now here's what you see. Now this is processing 369 rows as opposed to whatever it was processing beforehand, because I'm only looking at data from that session because it's already been pre-aggregated. My sorting key for this materialized view is the session ID, and I'm filtering by that session ID. So I'm massively minimizing the amount of data I actually need to process to answer this query. And I can really quickly, I'll just duplicate this, call this client data pipe. And I'm actually going to do, since I'm looking back, I'll just do to date as day because I'm looking back a much longer period here. So I'm going to store these aggregates by day instead of by hour. I'm going to call this client ID as client ID. So now I'm pre-calculating the client data instead of the session data. Same deal. Great. That's what we wanted. And I'm going to call client 0. I'm just going to give that a unique name, create a materialized view, and I'll call this client data MV. Same thing, I'm going to move that sorting ID. So it's sorted by client ID first. And then I'm going to set a TTL of 60 days because that's how long I want to be able to look back on this data. Run the populates. And then all I need to do is kind of do the same thing, go back into here. I'm just going to copy that session data node, update it for client ID. And is that end? day. Right now minus 60 days.
I don't know if you care to change your parameter name from session ID to client ID.
I absolutely do. And that default will no longer be valid. Let's see, I can go back and grab this real quick. Which I don't really need to have a default because I'm always going to pass it. But when we're looking at this in the pipe, it's just nice to have. Okay, so there you go. So now I'm pre-calculating that as well. And I want to do the last one. I know this is a little repetitive, but it'll be good to kind of see the performance gains we get on that API. I'll call this store data pipe. And then we're going to do same thing to date as day. We don't need to group by session ID. Day. So now we have for every day the score for each product. I also have this kind of special product called the Raptor Stare Down Hat, but that's not part of the offer, so we're not going to deal with that. We could actually filter that out if we wanted it to. I'll just call this store data 0, create my materialized view. In this case, I will filter by, I'll just do day. I'll leave that the way that it is because that'll be our primary filter. When we query this. And then let's go and do that final update here. We're going to do priority, handle, product type, count, merge, score as score from store data MV. Don't need that filter anymore. And we need to, 30 days is how we want it. Great. Times the day. Product type, always priority, handle, product type. There we go. Okay. So now let's go look at the API. We're going to look at the performance and let's go hit this API a few times.
I love that you can
actually see it just updated.
I love that the cart is a little nest, and when you put something in it, there's an egg. That is a beautiful detail, Cameron.
It's the details that matter. Okay, so now, I just kind of request this API a few times. Every time I open and close a cart, actually I could even do something like add this to the cart, add one, subtract one. BOGO. Yep, there it is, right? So if you have that second, you get that BOGO. So it's recalculating every time I do this. So let's go look at the API now. And if we look at, the process data is not even registering on this chart anymore. Let's go look back at the last 5 minutes. So I went from about 50 megabytes per request. So I've roughly an order of magnitude better in terms of the process data. And I've cut the average duration in half. Now I have a roughly 100 millisecond endpoint. So that's much more performant, not only in terms of latency, but actually in terms of the amount of data that I'm processing, the amount of compute work that I'm doing, and I still get the same results. I still get the results that I want because all of this is being calculated in real time through those materialized views. And actually, you can see I just added that common grackle shirt to my cart like 10 times. So if I go and just, maybe add a pileated woodpecker, we're going to see, boom, common grackle shirt is now number 1 because I just showed a bunch of intent and that was calculated into those materialized views. And now I'm making that request in the materialized view. That's it. We just did it. And I think that is a personalization API that has now been integrated into the store. The nice thing too is I can click one of these and it's gonna take me to that, open it up. This was awesome. This is exactly what we wanted it to do.
Great job, Cameron.
Great. We did it, and just in time.
In time.
Does anybody have any questions? Anything about what we did or didn't cover? Questions about materialized views? By the way, if you are interested, we're going to do kind of a materialized views deep dive towards the end of September. That'll be a great kind of session to join. If you're curious about materialized views, you want to know more about how they work in Tinybird, we're going to kind of dive into all of the sort of various use cases, the different merge trees that you can use for materialized views to do, different things besides storing aggregates. We can do things like deduplication and there's other ways to approach that. So we'll kind of get into all the various use cases for materialized views.
Yeah, that's towards the end of September, and then we have another live stream coming up on September 10th. So that's going to be on outgrowing Postgres, lessons from a YC startup. Cameron, any teaser you can give for that one?
No, that one's going to be really good. Blacksmith is a really cool startup. If you're a developer and you hate waiting on GitHub Actions and you find GitHub Actions compute to be expensive, Blacksmith is basically 2 times faster GitHub Actions at half the cost. That's a really cool, it's like a 1 line of code swap and you get kind of a great developer experience there. But they're a Tinybird customer, and they're going to sort of talk about their journey building analytics, and specifically sort of when they started to recognize that they were outgrowing their Postgres database for analytics and how to transition those kind of OLAP workloads off and onto something else. So that should be another good one. We're going to kind of interview them and talk about that journey for them.
Yeah, so less of a live coding session, but a lot of good details from, people who have actually lived it and, have gotten some value from Tinybird. Don't see any questions that have come in, but if you are watching the recording later or you think of something that you have a question about, head on over to our Slack community and you can post questions there, tbrd.co/community. Anything else, Cameron?
Awesome. That's it. Let's wrap it up.
Let's wrap it. Thanks,
job, everybody. All right, I'll take care.